The Way of Silence. Today we're talking with Eli Jaxon-Bear. I met him about 9 years ago at Esalen. And in those days he was a busy teacher. I think I followed a course in Zen meditation with him, but there was a little bit of Enneagram, everything of the New Age agenda. A few days ago someone called me and said, there is a guy in Amsterdam who is preaching silence. He's sitting there and he is radiating some kind of silence. I said, who is he? Eli Jaxon-Bear. Hey, I know this guy. And I got interested because that's a different image. So, welcome Eli.
Thank you. If I was preaching, then shoot me.
How did you got silenced?
Well, my spiritual search went on for 18 years. So when I met you, I had, as you know, I went through Zen, so we sat Zen together. I led a Tibetan Buddhist center, so there was a flavor of that. I was trying everything to find the ultimate teaching. And in 1990, in January of 1990, I was called to India to find my final teacher. And through the grace of this master, I was brought to his side, and what I was hungry for was the final stopping of all egoic mind. And I told him, I'm ready. This is what I want, and this is what he offered. And
please repeat that. You say what he offered was the stopping of the ego?
Yes, stopping of the mind, which is ego. This is what I wanted. I'd gone through everything looking for this. Because my first awakening happened in 1972 with LSD. I had no teacher, I had no understanding, but I was a political revolutionary, and I was searching for a way to stop the suffering in this world, a way to stop. I wasn't interested in enlightenment, I wasn't interested in anything except how do you stop the genocide, how do you stop the greed.
You were an activist then?
Yes, I was a revolutionary.
You were in Chicago in '68?
Yeah.
And who did you meet? You just say you met there, or you saw Allen Ginsberg?
That's the first time I saw Allen Ginsberg, but I wasn't interested because they were sitting in the park Oming, and I was interested in fighting the police. I was not interested in people calming down or being quiet. For me, freedom was political. And I gave my life to making a political freedom and recognized it doesn't work. And so I was desperate, searching for something, and through LSD, had this enormous awakening. But without a teacher and without right understanding, I knew it wasn't enough. There was still something missing. And I spent 18 years, that was 1972, exactly 18 years to the day, I walked into my master's house and saw my own self sitting on the bed, saying yes. And then the silence was so profound, so deep, so endless.
I'm a computer guy. When I hear you sound, say, someone pulled the plug.
Yes, it's pulling the plug. It's pulling the plug on suffering. So suffering is a wheel that's spinning all the time, and in this wheel there's constant changes, there's constant cycles, there's constant revolutions, there's constant decay, there's constant pleasure and pain, pleasure and pain, pleasure and pain, searching and losing, searching and finding, searching and losing. Finally you pull the plug on that wheel. And when you pull the plug on that wheel, you find what you've been searching for and running like a rat on a wheel.
Now this is a pretty Buddhist saying, you know, the samsara, the wheel of life that goes on. You stop it. You jump off. You say, I don't want it to be on the wheel anymore.
But turns out it doesn't even exist.
The wheel doesn't even exist.
It's only in your mind. It's a projection of your mind. It's a projection of your mind's desire for something that isn't already here.
But is that a Buddhist notion or is it a Hindu notion? How do I see that?
All ideas are traps. It's from my own experience. Whatever name you want to give it doesn't matter. What you find is the truth is true, and it gets expressed. It'll be expressed in anything that comes to the truth. So Sufi, Buddhist, Hindu, Christian, doesn't matter. St. John of the Cross had the same realization.
But why then still do you need a teacher? Why can't we be still and silent and realize that the rest is we don't need it?
If you can, good luck. If you can't, go for help.
Where? Come to Eli.
No, into your own heart. Into your own heart. If you're willing, if what you want is the truth more than anything else, then you're willing to die for it. See, what I learned as a political revolutionary was what I wanted was the end of suffering, the end of the genocide. I could not allow my country's genocide in Vietnam. It would be like being a Nazi And I couldn't do that. And so I was willing to die to stop it. And in the willingness to die, life is given.
Would you say that that stage in your life was necessary to come to the point where you were willing to give up everything?
At some point, you have to be willing to turn your back on all of existence to find what is unchanging. Whatever brings you to that is your own karma, your own dharma. So, but sometimes, eventually, when you're ripe enough, you realize that everything you've done hasn't been enough. All the successes haven't brought you what you want. All the failures, all the love, all the sex, all the drugs, all the rock and roll, finally hasn't left you ultimately satisfied. At that point, then you're willing to look somewhere else, in a direction you haven't looked before.
But is it possible that there are people who say, all the sex, drugs and rock and roll have brought me to the point where I am happy and this is fine?
Fine. If you're happy, it's no problem. This is only for people who are not satisfied with that.
How come that the world is full of people that are not happy? Is that worse than it was in the past? Do you see a future where that will change?
It's possible for it to change. You know, the Buddha said the first noble truth is life is suffering. As long as you're identified as a piece of meat, there is suffering. There has to be. The meat's on the way to the graveyard. If you're not aware of this suffering, if you're not aware of the terror that this meat is dying, then you ignore it. If you ignore it, which is what most people do, this is called ignorance. And out of this ignorance, then everything arises. Rage about being in a body, rage about who's in control of the body, terror about survival of the body, lust to satisfy the body. And all of this is the avoidance of this basic terror of the body's death and the old age, suffering, disease. So most people live in a state of ignorance is bliss. Yeah, you know. And you just look at the world as the result of that. The world is a result of everyone trying to be happy through ignorance is bliss. So you have greed, ignorance, hatred, you know, the desecration of the sacred world. Everything that's holy is destroyed. Everything pure is polluted.
How do you see the world? And you see the world as a polluted environment?
Actually, I see the world as a place of bliss.
Oh, I share that. Yeah?
Okay.
But I see that accepting the outside perfection as well as the inside perfection is the same.
That's right. There is no inside-outside. It's all a reflection of your own mind. So if you see love inside, love outside, there's no problem.
Mm-hmm.
Be happy.
Part of your life you've been chasing systems and explanation and theories to categorize the suffering, to bring some system to the madness. And one of your things was, or is, the Enneagram.
Well, you know, that wasn't my reason for chasing these things. My reason for chasing them was to find the tool that everybody can wake up. This is all I've been interested in. How is it possible that everyone can wake up now? Because my roots as an anarchist, political, psychedelic revolutionary, I know that it has to be non-hierarchical. It has to be non-special. It has to be available to everyone. And this was my search. And so it took me through different philosophies, different understanding. And the Enneagram was the last piece, the last teaching I needed before meeting my teacher. Because it showed me the structure of what I was not willing to look at. It showed me what was running subconsciously that I was just calling spontaneous. It showed me the deeper levels of ego that I was identifying with, even in my realization. And this was the great gift. In that, then I couldn't lie to myself anymore.
Okay, so you said that this system, this Enneagram, which is a system of self-knowledge, told you about yourself.
It told me about my not-self. It showed me the place where I've identified as self, what was actually meat and thoughts about the meat. Fantasies.
In computer terms, you can say the meat, but they're the defense system. did you understand your defense system? Could you do away with it then?
Yeah, defense system, the idea of me. This is all that's, who is it that suffers is me. Me is what suffers. Me is the idea of separation. Me is the idea of limits. And what the Enneagram does is describe the 9 styles of imaginary limitation, the 9 styles of imaginary suffering.
Is that the same as saying is the 9 styles of separation?
9 styles of separation.
So it's a system whereby you can recognize how you yourself or other people separate themselves from what? The outside world or the inside world?
There's no difference. Separating from your truth of yourself. Separating from your own true nature.
And in your view, that what is then outside, your life there, your relationships, the world, and that what is really inside is then the same?
The outside is a reflection of your mind. There is no outside. It's all a mirror. So in my experience, there's if you're willing to give up the habitual, robotic attachment to this idea of me, then you discover the true self.
Mm-hmm.
Inside first. The true self you discover is limitless, formless, beyond words, immaculate, pure love. And then you see its reflection is in the manifest universe. But first you turn away from the universe. Yeah. And in turning away from the universe and turning away from all form, you discover the absolute, immaculate, pure, immovable totality of yourself. Then you see that all form is merely an arising of a bubble out of that, infused with that, filled with nothing but that, surrounded by that, and returning to that.
Yes. My experience with like ketamine and all those psychedelic substances and Zen meditation, for me the point of awakening was that I realized that the world outside was perfect, and I from that point could accept that inside might be perfect too.
Well, if that works for you. Yet the world outside, of course, is perfect as it is. It's a perfect reflection of your own mind. But what I see you doing, possibly, and what I see people doing is this thing called self-acceptance, which means I'm okay just the way I am. Well, that's true. You are already Buddha nature. But if you're using the idea of that to perpetuate the suffering of the egoic play, then this is turning a sacred into pollution again. It's one of the traps that I see.
Could you say, there's different traps for different cats, huh? That are people who have more this outside or more this inside trap?
There's definitely different. The Enneagram describes the 9 flavors of traps. But ultimately, the trap is the identification with form. If you're identified with form, then you are seeing the false as true, and the true is disappeared. Mm-hmm. You turn towards the truth, you stay in the truth of the formlessness of your own being, and then you see all form reflects that. Then there's no problem.
The strange thing that amazed me about you in the past was that you combined Zen meditation and the Enneagram in those days. How did you link those? I mean, we can talk about the West and East Coast and people like Allen Ginsberg who made a link there, but you made one across what we call the silent ocean. The Pacific, we call this the still ocean, the silent ocean. So you made that thing from California to the Far East over the silence. How did you bring together Zen and the Enneagram, one mechanical system and one non-mechanical system? How did it work out in your mind?
I didn't do it.
You didn't reconcile them?
Things appear. Through the past tendencies, things appear. Through the grace of the blessedness of love, Zen appeared and was a very important teacher. Through that same grace, the Enneagram appeared. It's a very important teacher.
Your message now, which is to silence and to accept, is that more Zen or is that more Enneagram? Is that more?
They're all point at the same truth. Everything, all words are lies. All words are transinduction. And if the words come from the truth of silence, they point to that which they cannot speak.
Mm-hmm. And that is at this moment part of your teaching, because in fact you start your satsang with being silent for quite a while.
I don't even call it that, you know. I don't know where that name came from.
Well, how do you call it?
I don't.
You don't? Okay, well, you invite, or whatever way people appear.
Mm-hmm.
They sit in front of you, you sit in front of them, you sit like you are a Zen master, you have a certain radiation like that, but then you're quiet for quite a while.
Yes. I'd say quiet always is the best. And then speaking comes from quiet. And the words are infused with the truth of silence. Otherwise, a waste of time, waste of energy.
Yeah. That's silence.
Good.
Silence. Now there's silence of the mind and there's silence of the body too. Is there?
True silence is the transcendence of the idea of mind and body.
How do you see things like that? How do you call these things? Isolation tanks.
I've done isolation. I've done everything. You know, I liked isolation tanks a lot. It's a very enjoyable experience. But all experiences come and go. The truth of yourself is unchanging and therefore permanent, regardless of the experience.
We as Westerners, we look at the East and people are suffering there. You know, we think they're suffering more than we do. Maybe they don't. You go to the East quite a lot. You're the guy that taught you what you know lives where?
In India.
In India. So you go there. How is it possible that these people live in those conditions and that everybody dies on the street? And how do you feel about that? Is that a...
I see suffering everywhere. I don't see any more suffering in India than I do in Europe. I see materially people have it much better here, but I don't see any less suffering.
Well, in our eyes, it looks like they have no food and whatever.
Yeah,
materially.
Definitely. Materially, there's definitely more material suffering. There's suffering of hunger, suffering of disease, much more so in some places in this world. And that is because of there's the wealthy that suck up the 90% of the resources. But even then...
Still a bit of an activist there, eh?
But even then it doesn't matter, because you see peasants living in absolute poverty and often happier than the bankers you see in Zurich. So you can't say that about, there's the suffering of the body, but the deeper and more important is the suffering of the mind. And the suffering of the mind can be cured regardless of the suffering of the body.
Structure of society there seems then to be more towards non-material happiness.
I wouldn't say so.
No?
No, I wouldn't say so. Not anywhere that I've been. I say the whole world is polluted by materialism and greed and a hunger for more.
Before we spoke about the barriers, the limits of love, I feel here that you still have this activism. You think there's something nasty out there in the world, some pollution and greed.
It's only the projection of your mind. Pollution and greed appears in the mind. And if it's dealt with in your own mind, then there's one less spot of suffering on Mother Earth. That's all. So you start at home. The revolution starts at home.
Which means here.
Yes. So you root out this selfishness and greed. You look at it, you face it. You face the unbearableness of, oh my God, all of my preaching, all of my good works, all of my idealism, all of this, on the root of it, there's this deep core of what about me? Look what I'm doing. All the egoic pride, egoic shame. You finish it. Then there's one less suffering on Mother Earth.
What results then is service? Is the feeling of service, the need to serve?
I'd say that service is a natural expression of love. Then love expresses itself through this life. Love is a life of service, life of beauty.
Eli, you've silenced me. Thank you.
Well, then there's hope for the world, Luc. I'm so happy.
Okay.